And I guess that's the contentious issue. Not that in itself FFP is controversial, because of course it is, and people can have legitimate opposition to it. It's that they agreed to it, they signed up to it, they didn't oppose it, and then they set out to sort of systematically undermine it. And I guess that's where the problem is.
Welcome to Season 2 of Football Uncovered. In Season 1, we took you inside Blackburn and Leeds, Portsmouth and Liverpool, FIFA and a lot more. We heard extraordinary stories of football chaos, cock-ups and outright corruption. This season, we're going inside 8 more Premier League clubs, as well as having 2 special episodes. I'm your host, Will Brazier, and every episode, of course, I'm joined by Sporting Intel's Nick Harris. Nick, are you well?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, raring to go with Season 2.
But let's first welcome our guest who has followed Manchester City's astonishing history on and off the pitch. Welcome, Rob Harris. Rob, how are you?
Oh, well, good to see you guys, and good to join at the start of a new season. Hope you've had a good mid-season break.
Well, let's get on to the on-pitch achievements to start with. Obviously, we listed all of those records and achievements in the introduction. But Rob, I think it's become almost a meme, hasn't it? The way that Pep Guardiola is almost revolutionising English football from top to bottom, even down at kiddie areas in the Conference South. They're trying to play out from the back to not get very degrees of success. But what has he done for English football on the pitch?
We've had the experience to witness one of the greatest coaches in football history coming to the Premier League, bringing his philosophy, bringing his nous, and we've got to enjoy that as much as we often talk about those who've got to witness Ronaldo and Messi on the pitch. The fact is the Premier League has attracted one of the great managerial minds and the way he's actually proved people wrong as well at times. I think the sense was that some would hope he would actually come unstuck. The fact, yes, he'd had great success at Barcelona, but he'd walked into a team with Messi and one built with the academy structure there that brought him all the talent and having the prestige of a club behind him, whereas at Manchester City, still very much a club having to prove itself on the international stage to make itself a destination for the top talent. And the fact is, obviously, its success didn't come instantly. There were the setbacks perhaps in those opening weeks and months as he got used to English football, and he has had a lot to spend and he's had to work out what to do with that talent, and some of the signings haven't paid off. And yet we've got to see him also encounter a very competitive league as well at times. Yes, they have had the great success of the Premier League titles, the Centurions team as well, but actually the obstacles that he has faced, whether it's going behind at Cheltenham in the FA Cup or the fact that actually he's not winning the title year after year, the fact that I was in Lisbon to see when they came unstuck in the Champions League in the quarterfinals in the summer of 2020, which showed actually he has to find new ways of producing that success.
Manchester City now for a couple of years have had the most costly assembled squad in the history of world football, as in if you add up how much they paid in fees, you're basically looking at a squad of 24, 25 players where you have 2 genuinely world-class players in every position. They've got 25 players that cost an average of sort of 45 to 50 million pounds each. We know, generally speaking, at the top end of elite European football, you can't do this kind of thing without lots of money. Equally, conversely, you can have a lot of money and screw up year after year. Manchester United fans will know what that's been like since Fergie left. But I don't know, Will and Rob, what do you think in terms of it doesn't diminish Manchester City's success in the way that Chelsea, when Abramovich came along, it didn't diminish, certainly for their fans, the fact that it took a lot of money. But, what's your thinking on how much it costs to achieve this, both of you?
Manchester United have spent a lot and spent it badly. Manchester City have spent unwisely on certain players. Was it £42 million on Mangala, for instance? And that was they can make those hefty investments, they can make mistakes, and they'll often say, of course, they haven't broken transfer records by positions, but actually that depth of talent that they can have in each position gives them that sort of certainty of the of the backup and the depth in the squad. And undoubtedly there is spending across the game. And they will say at City that they had to sort of turbocharge and accelerate that spending because they didn't have the inbuilt advantage over many years that they've done so. And I think the success for City for a lot of fans is still shaped by the failures, the fact that they were relegated, the fact that having to get up through the playoffs from the third tier, forget what was even called in 1999 now, and that has shaped the psyche as well. The fact that being the underdogs, we're not really there as the City fans talk about, and that mentality really is there. You see to this moment almost that people don't expect them to succeed and want to deny them the success, and that's why I think City fans in particular feel quite protective when there is natural criticism of them or scrutiny of how they've achieved it.
Well, this is one of the ironies, of course, is Manchester City fans will complain that FFP has shackled them and prevented them from investing in the way that their owner wanted to, and yet you have actually got a football club that has got the most expensively assembled football team in the world, on course as we speak for a possible quadruple. Obviously spanners always get thrown in the works. Bayern Munich or another team could disrail them, in Europe. Freak results could happen in cup finals and other matches, but nonetheless on course as we speak for a quadruple, and this is after being shackled by FFP. So goodness knows where Man City or other clubs would be without any FFP. But I mean that's maybe a different argument. Whether FFP is right or wrong, and again, there's entirely legitimate arguments over whether FFP should limit what you spend to effectively be what you can earn in legitimate income from tickets and TV and commercial deals. There's obviously entirely legitimate arguments both sides over whether it's right or wrong. But one thing that should be clear is that the whole system was actually approved by all the major clubs in Europe through effectively the clubs union, the ECA, and at no point did Manchester City or indeed any of the clubs challenge it, oppose it, voice opposition to it, or say this is wrong and we don't want this to happen. What they did is they agreed to it, and they and others who fall foul of it, which includes PSG, they then set about to systematically trying to undermine it by effectively cooking their books as they were found to have done in 2014 and try to subvert it by inflating their income in some ways and offloading their expenses in other ways. And I guess that's the contentious issue. Not that in itself FFP is controversial, because of course it is, and people can have legitimate opposition to it. It's that they agreed to it, they signed up to it, they didn't oppose it, and then they set out to sort of systematically undermine it. And I guess that's where the problem is for people whose job it is to sort of report that and analyse it and to follow it, and City fans who see that as people with an agenda against their club as opposed to simply reporting what's happened.
I think we can forget now some of the missteps early on in the leadership of City in the early Mansour era. They had to build up this sophisticated boardroom as well, as they brought in all the officials from to beef up the boardroom. And I can think up, I think back to encountering Gary Cook when I was asked to go in to see him in 2009, when he said to myself and another journalist that Milan and Kaka bottled it over the transfer, and that just showed how difficult it was for City at the time, and the fact they even went public, picking such a bit of a spat with Kaka and his team about the fact he didn't want to join. Then a few months later, we had the firing of Mark Hughes, and I'm sitting there in the room when again Gary Cook is like hammering on the table, there is no conspiracy. That was when Roberto Mancini came in, and the suggestion was Mancini was already in Manchester, lined up to replace Mark Hughes, and the fact, was he around the game already? When did Hughes know? And this just showed actually how City were stumbling themselves into this sort of new era with wealth and status and the greater sort of attention on them, and they were sort of still building as a club. This is the time then they're trying to sort of work and make themselves competitive on the pitch, but perhaps still trying to sort out those, the leadership and get that in place too.
Right, let's go back to 2014 and the first time City failed FFP, or rather, the first time City were charged with FFP failures. This hypothesis that really it was 2014 when City were found to have broken FFP, they accepted their guilt, they paid their fine, that the animus really sort of started to build then. Not just from fans of rival clubs who suddenly perceived them as being proven cheats, but also those other American-owned clubs, particularly Arsenal, Liverpool and Manchester United, that they started to sort of agitate that this wasn't acceptable.
Yeah, and also I think we're seeing around that time as well the growing hostility from City fans towards UEFA. So we get the booing of the Champions League anthem, and that sense of they're against us. I mean, they had other grievances as well. Was it the fact that the racist abuse by Spartak Moscow led to the game being played behind closed doors there, so fans even of City couldn't go into the game as well? Am I remembering?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there was absolutely legitimate complaints about UEFA's shambolic and pathetic treatment for racist incidents, including involving Manchester City. Entirely legitimate grievance, yeah.
And when we think back to 2014, obviously the reason why they were found guilty was the sense that they had overinflated sponsorships. The fact that a lot of their sponsorships came from Abu Dhabi companies, UAE firms, and UEFA was sort of testing the value of them and going to independent companies to say, actually, if this was a company not connected to Abu Dhabi, how much would they be paying for the sponsorship if it was just from some other part of the world? And by that, they judge fair value and what might be exceeding that. And then there are even things like bonuses, weren't there, into those contracts? And it's probably the time we should congratulate Manchester City on their famous 2013 FA Cup victory
over Wigan, which we all remember because they, of course, were paid their win bonus for winning that FA Cup.
Yeah, of which, of course, they never actually did win the competition, but
no.
Sponsorship terms, they got it. And, so from that point, we see the grievances, but perhaps because there was not the significant consequence, that it was only the reductions on the squad and, the fine that they could cushion, that perhaps City fans were not as vociferous in terms of the full animosity that came later when you're sort of told we're going to ban you from the Champions League completely, particularly when it's the one trophy that you're trying to win to complete the set, really, in terms of domestic and European trophies. I mean, the one thing they haven't won is won a European trophy in the Mansour era, the thing they're really chasing.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to finish, we throw this forward. Look at where Man City are now, which is winning the Premier League this season almost certainly, probably doing a domestic cup double. They're certainly favourites to do that, and potentially winning the Champions League. Is that's great for Manchester City fans? You could say we can all acknowledge that Pep's done a lot. Like you said, people playing out from the back in the 9th and 10th tiers of football. He's had a cultural change which is very positive. He's not going to last forever there. He'll be there another season or 2 or 3. But the Pep Guardiola era will end at some point, and Manchester City will presumably revert to being one of the best teams rather than the head and shoulders best team. But just in general terms, and this is a question, maybe throughout this particular series of the podcast, which is asking sort of what is the point for each of these clubs and what is the future of football? What does the future of football look like if Manchester City do maintain the dominance they're showing currently, whereby they and a very small group of other sort of super clubs are just got complete strangleholds on their leagues? I mean, as in recent years, Paris Saint-Germain have had, the Spanish giants have had, Juventus have had, Bayern Munich have had. What does this actually mean for domestic football? Is it a good thing that one club richer than any other club can continue to sort of have a stranglehold, but not just a stranglehold domestically, but I guess be in a position where they're agitating to be major stakeholders in a future European Super League and maybe a future global league and a FIFA Club World Cup? Is that a good thing from the point of view of football?